My name is David Sherman. I am 45 years old, and I work as a ranch security supervisor for Adamantium Holdings, managing security operations at a 512-acre ranch property in the Uintah Basin of northeastern Utah, about 30 miles southeast of Roosevelt. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from, please. I've been working ranch security for 13 years, spending the last 6 at this property, which requires 24-hour security monitoring due to ongoing research activities and frequent incidents involving unexplained phenomena that have been documented at this location for decades. This happened last August while conducting routine night patrol of the property perimeter, checking security cameras and motion sensors positioned throughout the ranch to monitor for unauthorized intrusion and document any unusual activities that might occur on the property. The ranch sits in high desert terrain surrounded by the Uintah Mountains, with terrain that includes sagebrush, flats, seasonal streams, and rocky outcroppings that provide cover for wildlife, including deer, elk, and predators like mountain lions and bears. Around 10 p.m., while checking a section of the eastern property boundary, multiple motion sensors were triggered simultaneously across different areas of the ranch, indicating movement by something large enough to activate security systems positioned to detect human-sized intrusion. I responded to investigate the sensor activations using night vision equipment and radio communication with the ranch's monitoring station to coordinate security response to what appeared to be systematic intrusion across multiple property boundaries. When I reached the first sensor location, I found large tracks in soft earth that immediately distinguished this incident from normal wildlife activity. The tracks were roughly humanoid, but much larger than human feet, with claw marks indicating something extremely powerful. Most concerning was that the tracks showed evidence of the creature moving on both 4 legs and 2 legs, with footprints that suggested it could transition between different forms of locomotion, depending on terrain and circumstances. Around 11 p.m., while following the track pattern across the property, I encountered the source of the security activations. Moving through the sagebrush about 150 yards away was something that appeared to be a large wolf, but its behavior and proportions were wrong for normal canine species. Through night vision, I could observe the creature for several minutes as it moved through the ranch with obvious intelligence and purpose. Most disturbing was that the creature seemed to be conducting systematic surveillance of security installations and research facilities. Around midnight, while I was documenting the creature's movement patterns, something unprecedented occurred. The wolf-like creature began changing shape, transforming into what appeared to be a large bird of prey with wingspan that exceeded any known Utah wildlife. The transformation was fluid and natural, not like special effects, but like watching a natural process that violated everything I understood about animal biology. The creature maintained the same intelligence and purpose in bird form that it had shown as a terrestrial predator. In bird form, the creature flew reconnaissance patterns over the entire ranch property, clearly conducting aerial surveillance that provided comprehensive view of security arrangements and research activities being conducted at the facility. Around 1 a.m., the creature landed near the main ranch buildings and transformed again, this time into what appeared to be human form, but with proportions and movements that remained wrong despite the basically human appearance. In human form, the creature attempted to approach research buildings and security installations with intelligence that suggested it understood the purpose and importance of different facility areas, and was specifically interested in areas containing sensitive equipment. I maintained observation while coordinating with monitoring station personnel to ensure all security systems remained active and that appropriate documentation was being created of the creature's capabilities and behavior patterns. Around 3 a.m., the creature transformed back into wolf form and departed the property, moving toward the Uintah Mountains with speed and coordination that suggested intimate knowledge of local terrain and escape routes. When I filed my security report, I documented all observations while following established protocols for unusual incidents at the ranch, which included specific procedures for encounters involving shape-shifting entities and their surveillance activities. 2 days later, I was contacted by Dr. Travis Taylor from the National Institute for Discovery Science, who had been conducting research at the ranch and requested detailed interviews about my encounter with the shape-shifting creature. Dr. Taylor explained that similar shape-shifting encounters had been documented at the ranch for decades, with consistent reports from security personnel, researchers, and previous property owners describing entities capable of assuming multiple animal and human forms. According to his research, the phenomena seemed to be related to the unique geographic and electromagnetic characteristics of the Uintah Basin, which created conditions that might allow certain entities to manipulate their physical form in ways that exceeded normal biological limitations. He also mentioned that the shape-shifting entities showed consistent interest in human activities and technology, particularly research equipment and security systems, suggesting intelligence that exceeded normal animal curiosity about human installations. I continue working security at the ranch because it is challenging work that requires constant adaptation to unusual circumstances, and because the research being conducted there might provide important insights into phenomena that occur throughout the American Southwest. When I encounter shape-shifting entities during security operations, I maintain professional observation and documentation while ensuring that security protocols protect both research activities and personnel from potentially dangerous interactions with beings whose capabilities and intentions remain unknown. My name is Robert Cliffside. I am 37 years old, and I work as a search and rescue coordinator for Zion National Park, managing emergency response operations throughout the park's 229 square miles, including the technical rescue operations required for Angel's Landing and other high-risk hiking areas. I've been working park search and rescue for 12 years, responding to emergencies on some of Utah's most challenging terrain, including Angel's Landing, a 1,488-foot-tall rock formation that requires hiking along narrow ridges with 1,000-foot drops and chains for assistance on the most technical sections. This happened last September, while coordinating search operations for Jennifer Martinez, a 28-year-old from Phoenix who had been day hiking Angel's Landing alone and disappeared during what should have been a routine climb on one of Utah's most popular but dangerous hiking trails. Martinez was an experienced hiker who had completed similar technical trails throughout the Southwest and was familiar with the challenges of Angel's Landing, including the final half-mile section that requires using chains to navigate narrow ridges with extreme exposure. Angel's Landing sees over 300,000 hikers annually, but the trail's technical nature results in multiple fatalities each year from falls, heat exhaustion, and other emergencies that can occur on exposed terrain at elevation over 5,700 feet. When Martinez failed to return to the trailhead as scheduled and her vehicle was found in the parking area after dark, park rangers initiated search protocols for missing hikers on technical terrain, where accidents can be fatal and rescue operations extremely challenging. We began search operations at first light, using teams positioned at multiple points along the Angel's Landing Trail to cover the most likely routes and check areas where injured or lost hikers might seek shelter or assistance. Around 10 a.m., our search team found Martinez's day pack positioned beside the trail at Scout Lookout, the area where hikers can choose to continue to Angel's Landing summit or return via the safer trail route that doesn't require technical ridge walking. The pack contained all her essential hiking gear, water, food, first aid supplies, and navigation equipment that would be necessary for safely completing the Angel's Landing climb in hot desert conditions. Most concerning was that Martinez's hiking permit and identification were in the pack, along with her car keys and cell phone, making it impossible to understand why an experienced hiker would abandon essential equipment at the decision point for the trail's most dangerous section. We found no tracks or signs indicating Martinez's direction of travel after abandoning her gear. The rocky terrain around Scout Lookout doesn't readily show footprints, but the location didn't correspond to any obvious emergency or navigation problem. Expanding our search, we covered the chains section of Angel's Landing and all potential routes where confused or injured hikers might travel, including emergency descent routes and areas where someone might seek shelter from heat or weather. About a mile beyond Scout Lookout, in terrain accessible only through technical rock scrambling, we discovered more of Martinez's equipment, water bottles and clothing items, positioned in areas that would be extremely difficult to reach from established trail routes. The equipment distribution suggested that Martinez had been traveling through technical terrain that didn't offer advantages for reaching Angel's Landing summit and would require advanced rock climbing skills to navigate safely. On the third day of searching, while using helicopter reconnaissance to cover areas inaccessible to ground teams, we observed movement in a remote canyon area about 5 miles from Angel's Landing, in terrain that would be nearly impossible to reach through normal hiking. When ground teams reached the area where movement had been reported, we found no trace of Martinez, but several searchers reported unusual acoustic phenomena that made them uncomfortable continuing the search in that location. Sounds of voices echoing from canyon areas where no searchers were present. Martinez was officially listed as missing after 5 days of intensive searching, with no additional evidence located beyond her abandoned equipment on the Angel's Landing trail. Martinez's disappearance was the third similar case I'd encountered involving experienced hikers who vanished on Angel's Landing after abandoning their gear in patterns that suggested deliberate rather than emergency abandonment. I reviewed historical missing persons cases in Zion National Park and discovered that unexplained disappearances had occurred on technical trails for decades, typically involving solo hikers who vanished after abandoning essential equipment in ways that defied logical explanation. I spoke with veteran Zion Rangers about patterns in missing persons cases on Angel's Landing and other technical trails. They described disappearances that occurred primarily during peak hiking season, always involving experienced hikers who should have been capable of handling the technical challenges. Owen, retired ranger, told me about traditional knowledge from Paiute tribes whose ancestors lived in the Zion area for thousands of years. According to tribal teachings, certain areas of the canyon country were considered dangerous for solitary travelers, particularly locations where the boundary between earth and sky became thin. I spoke with veteran Zion Rangers about patterns in missing persons cases on Angel's Landing and other technical trails. They described disappearances that occurred primarily during peak hiking season, always involving experienced hikers who should have been capable of handling the technical challenges. Oni, retired ranger, told me about traditional knowledge from Paiute tribes whose ancestors lived in the Zion area for thousands of years. According to tribal teachings, certain areas of the canyon country were considered dangerous for solitary travelers, particularly locations where the boundary between earth and sky became thin. I continue working search and rescue at Zion because it is essential work protecting visitors in one of Utah's most spectacular but dangerous landscapes. But I am much more cautious about solo hiker recommendations for technical trails like Angel's Landing. When hikers go missing on Zion's technical trails, I begin search operations immediately, while understanding that some disappearances in Utah's canyon country might involve factors that conventional search techniques can't address. My name is Thomas Wasteland. I am 51 years old, and I work as an emergency response coordinator for the Utah Department of Public Safety, managing search and rescue operations throughout Utah's desert regions, where extreme temperatures and challenging terrain create survival situations requiring specialized rescue techniques. I've been working desert emergency response for 19 years, coordinating rescue operations in environments where summer temperatures exceed 110 degrees and winter conditions can be equally deadly for unprepared travelers who become stranded in remote areas. This happened last July while coordinating rescue operations for Mark Peterson, a 43-year-old from Colorado who had been hiking alone in the San Rafael Swell area of central Utah and had activated an emergency beacon indicating a survival situation requiring immediate assistance. Peterson was an experienced desert hiker who had completed multi-day trips throughout Utah's canyon country and was familiar with desert survival techniques and the importance of carrying adequate water and emergency equipment for high-temperature conditions. The San Rafael Swell covers over 600,000 acres of high desert landscape, including slot canyons, mesas, and rocky terrain, where temperatures during July commonly reach 115 degrees, and emergency response requires helicopter access due to limited road systems. Peterson's emergency beacon signal was received around noon, indicating his location in a remote section of the swell about 40 miles from the nearest paved road, and accessible only through technical canyon systems that would challenge even experienced desert travelers. We initiated helicopter rescue operations immediately, following protocols for high-temperature emergencies, where survival time can be measured in hours, rather than days when hikers become stranded without adequate water in extreme heat conditions. When our helicopter reached Peterson's beacon location, we found him in a narrow slot canyon with adequate shade and water sources that should have provided protection from heat-related emergencies, but his condition suggested more than simple dehydration or heat exhaustion. Peterson appeared confused and disoriented, despite having adequate supplies and being positioned in terrain that offered protection from the extreme temperatures that typically cause desert survival emergencies. His gear showed no signs of equipment failure or navigation problems. Most concerning was that Peterson reported being lost for several days, though his emergency beacon showed he had only activated it 6 hours earlier, and his planned hiking route indicated he should have been able to return to his vehicle within a single day. During helicopter evacuation, Peterson described experiencing time disorientation and navigation difficulties that didn't correspond to the actual terrain or his known hiking abilities. He reported feeling confused about location and elapsed time, despite carrying GPS equipment and being familiar with the area. Peterson was treated for mild dehydration and disorientation at the hospital in Price, but medical evaluation found no evidence of serious heat-related illness or medical emergency that would explain his survival situation or confusion about time and location. 3 days later, I was contacted by Dr. Janet Heatstroke from the University of Utah, who specialized in desert survival research and had heard about unusual aspects of Peterson's rescue through emergency medical contacts. Dr. Heatstroke explained that similar disorientation incidents had been reported in Utah's desert regions for decades, with experienced hikers reporting confusion about time, location, and navigation, despite having proper equipment and knowledge of desert survival techniques. According to her research, the phenomena seem to occur most frequently in areas where unique geological formations created electromagnetic or atmospheric conditions that could affect human navigation abilities and perception of time during extreme heat conditions. She described cases where experienced desert travelers reported feeling lost or confused in familiar terrain, often in areas where slot canyons, mesa formations, and heat reflection created environmental conditions that exceeded normal desert challenges. I spoke with members of local Native American communities whose ancestors had lived in Utah's desert regions for thousands of years, and who maintained traditional knowledge about safe travel through challenging terrain. They described traditional understanding that certain desert areas could affect human judgment and navigation during extreme heat, particularly locations where geological formations concentrated heat and created atmospheric conditions that challenged human survival abilities. According to traditional knowledge, safe desert travel required awareness of signs that indicated when environmental conditions exceeded human adaptation, and understanding that some areas demanded spiritual as well as physical preparation for survival. 3 days later, I was contacted by Dr. Janet Heatstroke from the University of Utah, who specialized in desert survival research and had heard about unusual aspects of Peterson's rescue through emergency medical contacts. Dr. Heatstroke explained that similar disorientation incidents had been reported in Utah's desert regions for decades, with experienced hikers reporting confusion about time, location, and navigation, despite having proper equipment and knowledge of desert survival techniques. According to her research, the phenomena seemed to occur most frequently in areas where unique geological formations created electromagnetic or atmospheric conditions that could affect human navigation abilities and perception of time during extreme heat conditions. She described cases where experienced desert travelers reported feeling lost or confused in familiar terrain, often in areas where slot canyons, mesa formations, and heat reflection created environmental conditions that exceeded normal desert challenges. I spoke with members of local Native American communities whose ancestors had lived in Utah's desert regions for thousands of years, and who maintained traditional knowledge about safe travel through challenging terrain. They described traditional understanding that certain desert areas could affect human judgment and navigation during extreme heat, particularly locations where geological formations concentrated heat and created atmospheric conditions that challenged human survival abilities. According to traditional knowledge, safe desert travel required awareness of signs that indicated when environmental conditions exceeded human adaptation, and understanding that some areas demanded spiritual as well as physical preparation for survival. I continue coordinating desert emergency response throughout Utah because it is essential work protecting people who visit some of North America's most challenging and beautiful desert landscapes. But I am more aware now of environmental factors that can affect human survival beyond simple heat and water requirements. When responding to desert survival emergencies, I maintain awareness that Utah's unique geological and atmospheric conditions might create challenges that exceed conventional desert survival knowledge and require rescue techniques adapted to environmental factors that aren't fully understood.